The purpose of this video tutorial is to show you how to go from a model in which you're reading and writing and through only one run and extending that into multiple runs incorporating different data from the database. So starting with this model, we already have both of our databases set up and our write blocks hooked up so that we can do one run successfully. So here's what happens when we do one run. We then see output data in the table appearing here for our single run that we're doing. Okay, so now if we try to go, let's try to just extend this out to doing 10 runs. So in order to do that, we go to the simulation setup window and we put in 10 runs. So we're now able to do 10 runs. And let's just see what happens. So we got our data out of there. Now, what's not being happened is I don't see data from all 10 runs being captured. So the database isn't, I'm not getting the data that I want, which is the data for all 10 runs. So I want to capture the data for all 10 runs here. And so you'll notice here that there's no provision for any extra output here. And so in order to get it to capture multiple runs, I'm going to need to have it go to subsequent rows of the output table. So I'm going to go to my options and I'm going to check record index is equal to run number. Then I click the OK button. So that will cause it to write to subsequent rows. So now if I click this button, I get this error message. So when it says row index specified is too big, that means that you told it do 10 runs, but after it got to the first run, and you're going to see a couple of error messages here, but notice that inside our database, we only have one row. So we're trying to access a row that does not exist. So we have two choices here. We can create the extra rows ourselves, or we can have ExtendSim do that automatically. And it does it automatically when we click expand the number of records in the destination if necessary. Now I'm going to give you a word of caution here because it'll expand the number of records, but it doesn't automatically purge the data from those records each time you run. So if it's going to keep that data there forever. Potentially you could have stale data if some other time you ran, you did fewer number of runs, then there's going to be stale data at the end of these rows. So you want to be just cognizant of that. If you want to get rid of that stale data, you need to go into the database, and I'll show you how to do that real quick. And so this, on the output, if we want to make sure that we never get stale data, we can open the database. So show ExtendSim database. And what we're going to do here is we need to actually edit the table properties. Now from here, we can edit the properties of various fields, but we can't actually edit the properties of the table. So to look at the actual table, we're going to go push this button here, which is schema view. And so the schema view, this lets us actually, when we right click, edit the table properties. So when we edit the table properties, this is where we can get it to delete all the runs. And we only want to do it each run in a multi-simulation run. If we delete every run, then we still aren't going to get the data that we want. So we just click delete records on first run in multi-simulation run. And then because the settings on the write block automatically expand it, it'll recreate the number of rows that we need. So let's go ahead and run again. So you notice that this ran successfully. And if we look at the write data, we can see each time, it looks like each time we just about did the same thing every time we ran. So we had that number of widgets being processed. Now, if we take a look at the data, input data, So what's the input data here? We have that if we look at the total number of widgets that got processed versus the total number of widgets that got created, those would be the same thing because nothing's happening to destroy the widgets in there. But much of this data looks very much the same. So what's actually happening here, if you go to the other database, it is you are only reading the first row over and over again. If you have not told it to do the equivalent thing for the writing where you have multi-run, all it's going to do is read. So this is actually just reading the same row of data, this 10 from the database, over and over. So if you want it to actually go down and read all these data fields, you're going to need to do the same thing, which is to check record index is equal to run number. So that will cause it to go down the rows of the data. So if we do that and we click run, now we get this error and it says row index is specified for read block 39. That is too big. So that has the same root cause as the previous error that I showed, which is we only have, if we look at this read data, there's only 5 rows worth of data, but I'm asking it to do 10 runs. So when it gets to that 6th one, it's going to barf on me and not be able to do anything with it. So it's going to do the first 6 rows worth of data and then it stops. And we can see here we have 6 rows worth of data and then it has stopped. Okay, so it's attempting again to read each row subsequently, but it's running out of data. So to do that, we either need to go in and add more data into the database table, if that's the correct solution, or we need to adjust. Sorry about that. I just ran again when I should have gone to the simulation setup and told it, hey, we only have 6 rows of data here. That's all we have. That's all we're going to run with. And now when we hit OK and run, it shouldn't be still saying that. Let's go ahead and see how much data we actually have. Oh, it's only 5 rows of data. So I need to go to simulation setup and then only ask it to read 5 rows worth of data. Okay, so that gets rid of the 2 most common errors you'll see associated with trying to do multi-runs, and they're both associated with having the correct number of records and having the correct settings on the option block. Thank you for watching, and this ends the tutorial.